The interrogation chamber aboard Outpost Station Vidian 7 had been designed to intimidate even the most hardened criminals in the sector. Energy barriers pulsed with a threatening blue glow. Reinforced quantum steel walls absorbed sound to create an unnerving silence. And the entire room was calibrated to project a subtle, gravitational imbalance that kept prisoners perpetually uncomfortable. For the species that comprised the Xanthari Imperium, these psychological tactics had proven remarkably effective over 3 centuries of law enforcement. Analyst Zarkon stood motionless in the observation room, his long, segmented fingers tapping a rhythmic pattern against the datapad. The dual hearts beneath his exoskeletal chest cavity pulsed with anticipation. This was his 43rd interrogation analysis, but the first involving a human prisoner. The captive had been secured after a border incursion into Xanthari space, a clear violation of the Outer Rim Treaty. Intelligence suggested she was a scout for the human-led alliance, probing defenses along the edges of Vidian space. "Are the restraint protocols in place?" Senior Inspector Plex asked, his voice carrying the distinctive harmonic resonance of the upper administrative caste. The inspector's carapace gleamed with the polished insignia of 20 cycles in service to the Imperium. "Yes, Inspector," Zarkon replied, eyes fixed on the holographic readouts. "The paralytic compound has been administered at 1.5 times the standard dosage, accounting for human physiological variances. Subject should maintain consciousness, but experience complete muscular incapacitation for approximately 4 hours. Plex made a clicking sound with his mandibles, a gesture of approval. "Excellent. The coordinator wants information on Alliance expansion plans. Their incursions have increased by 23% in the last cycle. This prisoner may provide valuable insight." "The preliminary classification suggests a mid-level operative," Zarkon noted, scrolling through the data. "Lieutenant Tara Jackson, according to identification markers. Vessel specifications indicate reconnaissance capabilities, not combat." "Humans are physically vulnerable but deceptive," Plex warned, adjusting his uniform. "Their evolutionary adaptability makes them unpredictable. Maintain emotional detachment during the interrogation." Zarkon nodded. Though privately, he found the warning unnecessary. Emotional detachment was the foundation of his analytical training. The Xanthari hive mind education system had conditioned him from hatching to prioritize collective knowledge over individual response. It was one of the evolutionary advantages that had allowed their species to expand across 3 solar systems within a single generation. The chamber door slid open with a hydraulic hiss, and 2 garrison regulators escorted the prisoner inside. The human female was of average height for her species, approximately 1.7 meters, with dark hair secured tightly against her scalp. Her Alliance uniform had been replaced with a standard gray detention garment, and her wrists were bound with sonic restraints. Despite the paralytic compound, she walked with only a slight stiffness, her gaze sweeping deliberately across every detail of the room. "Secure the prisoner," Plex ordered, and the GRs guided the human to the central chair. Energy fields immediately activated, creating a containment grid that would deliver a debilitating shock if breached. Zarkon noted the prisoner's vital signs on his monitor. Heart rate elevated, but within normal parameters. Respiratory function steady. Perspiration minimal. Either the human was exceptionally composed, or the paralytic compound was affecting her nervous system in unexpected ways. "Lieutenant Tara Jackson," Plex began formally, "you have violated Xanthari territorial sovereignty under Section 17 of the Outer Rim Treaty. This offense carries a minimum sentence of 10 cycles in a labor colony. Cooperation with this interrogation may be considered during sentencing." The human's eyes, a startling blue against her brown skin, focused on Plex. For 2.7 seconds, she remained silent. Then, inexplicably, she smiled. Zarkon felt an involuntary twitch in his left appendage. The paralytic should have rendered her facial muscles immobile. Yet, there she sat, lips curved upward in what his xenocultural training identified as a gesture of amusement or contempt. "The paralytic compound appears to be ineffective," he whispered to Plex. The inspector's posture stiffened. "Impossible. It was calibrated specifically for human biochemistry." "Perhaps we should increase the dosage," Zarkon suggested. But before Plex could respond, the prisoner spoke. "Your paralytic would have worked perfectly," Lieutenant Jackson said, her voice clear and controlled. "On a baseline human. Unfortunately for you, I'm running approximately 70 trillion neural nanites through my synaptic network." She flexed her fingers demonstratively. "They metabolized your compound about 30 seconds after injection." Plex's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of agitation that Zarkon had rarely observed in the senior officer. "Neural modification is prohibited under Alliance regulations," he stated, though his harmonic tones had flattened, betraying uncertainty. "Regulations evolve," Jackson replied, with a casual shrug that sent ripples through the energy field. "Just like species do. Or should, anyway." Zarkon's analytical mind raced to process this development. Neural nanite technology had been theorized, but never successfully implemented, according to Xanthari intelligence. If the Alliance had mastered it, their threat assessment would need significant recalibration. "Your unauthorized technology will be confiscated and analyzed," Plex declared, attempting to reassert control. "In the meantime, you will answer our questions regarding Alliance activity in Sector Vidian 12. Jackson tilted her head slightly. "Before we continue this conversation, you should know that I've been broadcasting since the moment I regained consciousness. 17 other operatives are currently receiving my signal." "Impossible!" Plex snapped. "This facility is shielded against all known transmission frequencies." "Known being the operative word," Jackson replied. "Quantum entanglement doesn't rely on electromagnetic transmission. It's instantaneous and unblockable. One of the benefits of having particles that exist in two places simultaneously." Zarkon's analysis protocols triggered an urgent alert. If the prisoner was telling the truth, the security implications were catastrophic. "Inspector," he began, "we should—" The station's emergency sirens abruptly wailed to life, their piercing shriek interrupting his warning. Red alert indicators flashed across his datapad, showing security breaches in multiple sectors. "What is happening?" Plex demanded, activating his risk communicator. "Coordinator Vix, report." The response came through, garbled with static. "Multiple systems compromised. Drone swarms of unknown. Request immediate." The communication cut off abruptly. Plex turned to the GRs. "Secure the prisoner for emergency transport. We're initiating lockdown protocols." The guards moved forward, but Jackson was already standing, the energy containment field around her flickering and destabilizing. "I wouldn't," she advised calmly. One guard reached for his neural disruptor, but Jackson moved with startling speed. She ducked beneath his arm, redirecting the disruptor's discharge back through his armor. The second guard lunged forward, only to find himself flipped over Jackson's shoulder, with a precise application of leverage that Zarkon recognized as a human martial technique called judo. Both guards lay immobilized on the floor within 5 seconds. "How did you disable the containment field?" Zarkon asked, scientific curiosity momentarily overriding his alarm. Jackson glanced at him with what appeared to be genuine appreciation for the question. "I didn't disable it. I redirected its energy signature through the nanite cloud I've been gradually releasing into the air. The field is still active, just not where you think it is." Plex had drawn his own weapon now, a pulse pistol capable of rendering organic tissue unconscious without permanent damage. "Stand down immediately," he ordered, though Zarkon detected the first harmonic vibrations of fear in his superior's voice. "You're still not understanding the situation," Jackson said, remaining perfectly still. "Those emergency sirens? That's the sound of approximately 5 billion nanodrones being released into your station's ventilation system. They're currently disabling weapons, communications, and propulsion systems throughout the facility. As if to confirm her statement, Plex's pulse pistol emitted a high-pitched whine before powering down completely. The inspector stared at the useless weapon in disbelief. "Those drones were stored in your body?" Zarkon asked, his analytical mind struggling to calculate the volumetric requirements for such a quantity. "Compressed in a quantum-folded pocket dimension anchored to my cellular structure," Jackson explained, as casually as if discussing the weather. "Another technology your intelligence reports probably labeled as theoretical." The station trembled, and the lighting flickered ominously. Zarkon's datapad displayed cascading system failures throughout the station. Life support remained functional, but virtually every offensive and defensive capability was offline. "What do you want?" Plex demanded, mandibles clicking in rapid agitation. "Originally, information," Jackson replied, stepping over the incapacitated guards. "We wanted to understand why the Xanthari have been pushing against Alliance boundaries, establishing outposts in violation of treaty agreements, and interfering with neutral trade routes." She approached Plex with measured steps. The inspector backed away until he reached the observation window, his exoskeleton scraping against the reinforced glass. "But now," Jackson continued, "now we're demonstrating a point. The Xanthari Imperium has operated under the assumption that your technological superiority and hive mind efficiency make you the dominant force in this sector. We're correcting that misapprehension." Plex's hand moved subtly toward the emergency beacon on his uniform collar, the last resort communication device that would alert the Xanthari fleet to a catastrophic station compromise. Jackson noticed. With lightning reflexivity, she seized his wrist, applying precisely calibrated pressure to the nerve cluster beneath his exoskeletal plating. Plex emitted a harmonic cry of pain as his arm went limp. "That wasn't very diplomatic of you," she chided. Zarkon watched the interaction with growing fascination. His entire analytical framework regarding human capabilities was being systematically dismantled before his eyes. According to classification protocols, humans were Category 3 threats, dangerous in groups but manageable through superior Xanthari technology. Jackson's demonstration suggested they warranted recategorization to at least Category 1. "You mentioned other operatives," Zarkon said, maintaining his analytical distance despite the crisis unfolding around them. "Are they conducting similar demonstrations elsewhere?" Jackson's gaze shifted to him, evaluating. After a moment's consideration, she nodded. "Simultaneously with this operation, Alliance forces are neutralizing 17 other Xanthari outposts across the sector, not through conventional warfare, but through similar technological interventions." Plex's compound eyes widened in horror. "That's an act of war!" "No," Jackson corrected firmly. "It's a negotiation tactic. Had we wanted war, we could have simply destroyed your facilities rather than temporarily disabling them." She released Plex's wrist and stepped back. "The Alliance Council voted against military action. This demonstration was the compromise solution." The station's communication system suddenly activated, bypassing normal authorization protocols. A stern female voice echoed through the chamber. "Attention, Xanthari Command. This is Admiral Fang of the Alliance vessel, Shadow Rift. We have established control over all Vidian sector outposts. No casualties have been reported. I repeat, no casualties. This is not an attack, but a demonstration of capability. We request immediate diplomatic communication with Xanthari High Command." Plex looked shattered, his proud posture crumbling as the implications became clear. The Imperium's defensive strategy had been built on the assumption of technological superiority. If that advantage had been neutralized or reversed, their entire expansion plan was compromised. "The Imperium will never negotiate under duress," he insisted, though his harmonic tones lacked conviction. "They already are," Jackson replied, nodding toward Zarkon's datapad, which was displaying an incoming priority transmission from Xanthari Central Command. Zarkon studied the message, his analytical mind rapidly assessing options and outcomes. "They're requesting our status and recommendations," he informed Plex. The inspector's mandibles clicked in rapid succession, a sign of severe distress. "We must advise immediate military response. The collective will cannot bend to external pressure." Zarkon considered the situation with the detached perspective that had made him a valued analyst. The evidence before him suggested that the Alliance possessed technological capabilities far beyond previous assessments. A military confrontation under these circumstances carried a high probability of catastrophic defeat. "I recommend accepting diplomatic communication," he stated, his voice steady despite the radical nature of his suggestion. "Current evidence indicates that our previous threat assessment of human capabilities was severely underestimated. A strategic reassessment is necessary before any military action is considered." Plex stared at him in disbelief, harmonic vibrations of shock emanating from his speech organs. "You would have us surrender our collective pride?" "I would have us survive to evolve," Zarkon replied simply. "The first principle of the collective is adaptation for survival." Lieutenant Jackson watched their exchange with evident interest, but made no move to interfere. The station continued to operate on minimal systems. Life support functioning, but weapons and propulsion remained offline. After 7.4 seconds of internal struggle, visible in his oscillating mandibles, Plex straightened his posture. "Transmit our recommendation for diplomatic engagement," he instructed Zarkon. "Include all observational data regarding the demonstration of force." Zarkon composed the message with precise, analytical detail, documenting the neural nanite technology, quantum entanglement communication, and nano-drone capabilities demonstrated by the human operative. He concluded with a formal recommendation for immediate diplomatic negotiations to prevent further escalation. As the message transmitted, Jackson nodded with apparent approval. "Oh, wise choice. The Alliance has prepared terms for mutual withdrawal from contested areas and establishment of a demilitarized zone. You orchestrated this entire incursion to force negotiations," Zarkon observed, his analytical mind reconstructing the sequence of events. "Sometimes the only way to start a conversation is to ensure both parties recognize each other's capabilities." Jackson replied. "The Xanthari refused 17 previous diplomatic overtures. The Imperium deemed Alliance concerns irrelevant to our expansion imperatives," Plex said stiffly. "And now?" Jackson asked. Before Plex could respond, Zarkon's datapad chimed with an incoming transmission. The response from Central Command was immediate and unprecedented. The Xanthari Imperium would send a diplomatic envoy to neutral space within 3 planetary rotations to discuss terms with the Alliance. "It appears the collective has adapted its position," Zarkon noted, allowing himself a moment of satisfaction at the logical outcome. Jackson smiled, a genuine expression that Zarkon's xenocultural training suggested indicated relief rather than triumph. "Then, my mission is complete. Admiral Fang will begin withdrawing nanodrone systems from your facilities immediately. Full functionality should return within 6 hours." As if on cue, the emergency sirens ceased their wailing, and the regular lighting resumed. Zarkon's datapad showed systems gradually coming back online throughout the station. "You will remain in custody until the diplomatic exchange," Plex insisted, attempting to salvage some authority from the situation. "No," Jackson replied simply. "I'll be departing with Admiral Fang to prepare for the negotiations. Your systems will allow my shuttle to launch without interference." She looked at Zarkon. "I suggest you attend the diplomatic meeting. Your analytical perspective would be valuable." Zarkon felt an unfamiliar sensation, a deviation from the collective consciousness that had guided his existence. Individual recognition was not a concept valued in Xanthari culture, yet he found himself responding positively to the human suggestion. "The decision will be made by Central Command," he stated, adhering to protocol despite his internal response. Jackson nodded and turned toward the door, which slid open without security authorization. Either way, I look forward to a more productive conversation next time. As she departed, leaving the two Xanthari officials with their incapacitated guards, Plex emitted a low, harmonic vibration of distress. The collective will not forget this humiliation. Not humiliation, Zarkon corrected, his analytical perspective asserting itself. Evolution. We have encountered a stimulus that requires adaptation. The collective has always prided itself on responding efficiently to changing conditions. Plex's compound eyes studied him with new awareness. Your perspective shows unusual individuation, Analyst Zarkon. I am simply processing the evidence before me, Zarkon replied, though he recognized the truth in Plex's observation. Something about this encounter had stimulated thought patterns that deviated from collective norms. He would need to examine this development during his next synchronization cycle. As systems throughout the station gradually returned to normal operations, Zarkon found himself contemplating the implications of the day's events, not just for the Imperium, but for his own understanding of interspecies relations. The categorical frameworks that had guided Xanthari expansion might be fundamentally flawed if they had so drastically underestimated human capabilities. Perhaps it was time for new analytical models, ones that emphasized understanding over classification, cooperation over dominance. That thought, he realized with something approaching wonder, was entirely his own. 3 planetary rotations later, Zarkon stood in the reception chamber of the Alliance vessel, Shadow Rift, his exoskeletal frame distinctly alien among the diverse crew. Central Command had indeed selected him as part of the diplomatic delegation, not as an analyst but as a special envoy, citing his unique perspective on recent developments. The ship itself defied Xanthari design principles, where Imperium vessels emphasized symmetry and efficiency. The Shadow Rift incorporated seemingly irrational elements, curved corridors that added unnecessary distance, decorative features with no apparent function, and an integration of biological components with mechanical systems that Xanthari engineers would have dismissed as redundant. Yet Zarkon could not deny that the vessel operated with remarkable effectiveness. Its black hull absorbed rather than reflected sensor scans, making it virtually invisible against the void of space. Its propulsion system generated no detectable energy signature, despite achieving speeds that rivaled the fastest Xanthari cruisers. Even the environmental systems adapted to the physiological needs of multiple species without compromise to performance. The Admiral will see you now, announced a tall, bipedal, being with iridescent skin that Zarkon identified as a Novan, one of the Alliance's founding species alongside humans. The Novan's bioluminescent patterns shifted in what appeared to be a formal greeting configuration. Zarkon followed the escort through a series of chambers, each accommodating different environmental requirements for the multitude of species that comprised the Alliance. The diversity was staggering, beings of gaseous composition drifting alongside silicon-based lifeforms, aquatic species in mobile containment fields conversing with photosynthetic entities. In Xanthari culture, such diversity would be classified as inefficient, requiring too many accommodations and compromises. Yet the Alliance appeared to function not despite this diversity, but because of it, each species contributing unique perspectives and abilities to the collective whole. The realization sent a disquieting ripple through Zarkon's analytical framework. Was it possible that the Xanthari emphasis on uniformity and hierarchical structure, long considered evolutionary advantages, actually limited their potential in some fundamental way? The thought bordered on sedition against the collective consciousness, and Zarkon quickly compartmentalized it for later examination. Now was not the time for philosophical reconsideration of foundational principles. He had a diplomatic mission to complete. The command center of the Shadow Rift defied Xanthari expectations once again. Rather than the rigid, hierarchical arrangement of Imperium vessels, The space was arranged in a circular configuration, with workstations positioned to facilitate direct communication between all personnel. At the center stood Admiral Fang, a human female of advanced age by their species standards. Her silver hair cropped short against her scalp, and her posture radiating an authority that required no external signifiers. "Special Envoy Zarkon," she acknowledged with a slight inclination of her head. "Welcome aboard the Shadow Rift. I trust your accommodations have been suitable." "They have been adequate," Zarkon replied formally. "The atmospheric composition has been calibrated to Xanthari physiology with acceptable precision." The Admiral's lips curved slightly, the same expression of amusement that Lieutenant Jackson had displayed during the interrogation. "High praise indeed from a Xanthari. Please, join us at the conference table. Your colleagues are already present." Zarkon followed her gesture to where 3 other Xanthari representatives waited. He recognized Coordinator Vix from the outpost station, his carapace still bearing the distinctive markings of the administrative caste. The other 2 were unknown to him, likely high-ranking officials from Central Command sent to evaluate the situation firsthand. As Zarkon took his position, he noted that the Alliance representatives formed an equally diverse group: humans, Novans, and several species he could not immediately identify. Lieutenant Jackson sat among them, now dressed in the formal uniform of the Alliance Diplomatic Corps, rather than the reconnaissance attire she had worn during her capture. "Now that we are all assembled," Admiral Fang began, "let us address the situation directly. 3 cycles ago, the Alliance conducted a coordinated demonstration of technological capability across 17 Xanthari outposts. This action was taken after repeated diplomatic overtures were ignored or dismissed by Imperium authorities. One of the unidentified Xanthari officials, his carapace bearing the intricate etchings of the Strategic Oversight Division, clicked his mandibles in irritation. The Imperium does not respond to coercive tactics. Yet here you are, Jackson observed quietly. Admiral Fang raised a hand in a subtle gesture that immediately silenced further comments from both sides. "We are not here to assign blame or justify past actions. We are here to establish a framework for coexistence that prevents future confrontations." She activated a holographic display in the center of the table, showing a 3-dimensional map of the disputed sector. The Alliance proposes the establishment of a demilitarized zone, extending 3 light-years from the current border. All military outposts within this zone would be decommissioned or converted to scientific research stations with multinational oversight. The Strategic Oversight officials' mandibles clicked rapidly. "Unacceptable. The Xanthari Imperium has invested considerable resources in those outposts. They are essential to our expansion program. Your expansion program has repeatedly violated existing treaty agreements," countered a Novan representative, bioluminescent patterns pulsing with intensity. "The proposed DMZ merely enforces boundaries already established in principle." Zarkon observed the exchange with analytical detachment, noting the rhetorical patterns and emotional undercurrents. The Xanthari representatives were operating from a position of wounded pride and strategic uncertainty, a dangerous combination that could lead to irrational escalation despite the clear evidence of Alliance technological superiority. "If I may," he interjected, drawing surprised attention from his fellow Xanthari. "Perhaps we should consider the evolutionary implications of this juncture." Admiral Fang nodded encouragingly. "Please elaborate, Envoy Zarkon." "The first principle of Xanthari collective philosophy is adaptation for survival," Zarkon stated, choosing his words carefully. "Our expansion program was developed based on assessment models that recent events have proven fundamentally flawed. We classified the Alliance as technologically inferior and strategically disorganized due to its diversity. This classification has been demonstrably invalidated." The Strategic Oversight officials' compound eyes fixed on Zarkon with clear disapproval. "You suggest surrendering our territorial ambitions based on a single demonstration." I suggest reevaluating our strategic position based on empirical evidence, Zarkon corrected. The demonstration was not a single event but a coordinated action across 17 outposts, executed with precision and restraint. It revealed technological capabilities that our intelligence services had categorized as theoretical at best. He gestured to the holographic display. Our expansion model assumes linear progression through uncontested or minimally defended territories. The current evidence indicates that continued expansion along the Alliance border would result in conflict with an adversary possessing superior technological capabilities and a demonstrated willingness to deploy them. A moment of silence followed his analysis. Zarkon could sense the ripple of discomfort among his fellow Xanthari. His logic was sound, according to collective principles. Yet the conclusion challenged deeply ingrained imperial ambitions. Lieutenant Jackson broke the silence. The Alliance doesn't seek to contain Xanthari expansion. We propose redirecting it toward the Cygnus Void, an unclaimed region with abundant resources that doesn't infringe on established territories. The holographic display shifted to show the region in question, a vast, star-rich area beyond Alliance space that Xanthari surveys had previously designated as low priority due to navigational challenges. The Void's gravitational anomalies make it difficult to traverse with current Xanthari propulsion systems, the strategic oversight official noted dismissively. Which is why, Admiral Fang continued, the Alliance offers to share adapted navigation technology as part of the agreement. Our combined scientific knowledge could transform a challenging region into a valuable frontier for both our peoples. Zarkon's analytical mind processed the offer rapidly. It was strategically sound, redirecting Xanthari expansion away from contested areas, while simultaneously addressing the technological gap that the recent demonstration had exposed. More importantly, it offered a path that preserved collective pride while acknowledging the new realities. A technological exchange would require unprecedented cooperation, Coordinator Vix observed. His tone neutral, but his mandibles relaxed, a sign that he found the proposal intriguing. Precisely, Admiral Fang confirmed. We envision joint research initiatives, exchange programs for specialists, and eventually, collaborative settlement projects. The Cygnus Void offers opportunities that neither of our civilizations could fully exploit alone. As the discussion continued, Zarkon observed a subtle shift in the harmonic undertones of his fellow Xanthari. The initial defensive posture was gradually yielding to analytical consideration of the opportunities presented. The collective consciousness, true to its evolutionary principles, was beginning to adapt to the new paradigm. By the conclusion of the 6-hour negotiation session, a preliminary agreement had been established: the creation of a demilitarized zone along the current border, withdrawal of military forces from contested regions, establishment of joint scientific outposts within the neutral territory, and the formation of a collaborative expedition to survey the Cygnus Void. As the formal proceedings concluded and the participants prepared to return to their respective quarters, Lieutenant Jackson approached Zarkon in the corridor outside the conference chamber. Your intervention was crucial, she said without preamble. The negotiations might have collapsed without your analytical perspective. Zarkon's compound eyes studied her with newfound awareness. I merely applied Xanthari principles to the evidence at hand. But you did so as an individual, not just as a representative of the collective, Jackson observed. That's rare among your people, isn't it? The question penetrated deeper than she could know. Since the interrogation room encounter, Zarkon had been experiencing thought patterns that deviated from collective norms, individual perspectives that emerged from his unique experiences rather than from the synchronized consciousness of the hive mind. Individuation is considered a developmental anomaly in Xanthari culture, he acknowledged. Yet I find myself unable to reconcile recent observations with collective wisdom without some degree of independent analysis. Jackson smiled, not the triumphant expression from the interrogation room, but something warmer. more genuine. That's how it starts, you know, real evolution. Not just adapting external behaviors to survive, but transforming internal perspectives to thrive. Before Zarkon could formulate a response, Admiral Fang appeared at the end of the corridor, gesturing for Jackson to join her. With a respectful nod to Zarkon, the lieutenant departed, leaving him to contemplate her words. Evolution. It was the foundational concept of Xanthari philosophy. Yet they had applied it primarily to collective advancement, rather than individual growth. The idea that personal transformation might contribute to species evolution represented a paradigm shift that both disturbed and intrigued him. As he returned to his assigned quarters aboard the Shadow Rift, Zarkon began composing his report to Central Command. The diplomatic breakthroughs would be documented in precise detail, the strategic implications analyzed with characteristic thoroughness. But beneath the formal analysis, a new perspective was taking shape, one that recognized the potential value of diversity, the strength that might emerge from cooperation rather than dominance, and the possibility that the Xanthari collective could evolve not just through conquest, but through connection. It was a dangerous thought, one that challenged the very foundations of Imperium philosophy. Yet, as he completed his report, Zarkon found himself including a final recommendation that would have been unthinkable mere days ago: that he be assigned as permanent liaison to the Alliance Xanthari Joint Expedition, not just to observe and analyze, but to participate in the creation of a new interspecies understanding. The collective might reject his recommendation. They might even recall him for synchronization therapy to correct his individuating tendencies. But as he transmitted the report, Zarkon experienced something entirely new, a sense of anticipation for an uncertain future shaped by individual choice rather than collective directive. Perhaps, he reflected, that was the most profound demonstration Lieutenant Jackson had delivered in the interrogation room. Not just that the Alliance possessed unexpected technological prowess, but that the future belonged to those willing to evolve beyond the limitations of their own assumptions. The interrogation room couldn't hold her, and now, Zarkon realized, the rigid structures of Xanthari thought could no longer contain him either. One stellar year later, the Joint Expedition Vessel Adaptation entered the outer boundaries of the Cygnus Void. Its unique design reflected the collaborative nature of its mission. Xanthari efficiency seamlessly integrated with Alliance adaptability, creating a ship unlike any that had come before. On the observation deck, Special Liaison Zarkon stood beside Lieutenant Commander Jackson, watching as the swirling gravitational anomalies created spectacular distortions in the surrounding starfield. His exoskeleton had been modified with communication implants that facilitated direct information exchange with the diverse crew, while Jackson's neural nanites had been programmed with Xanthari linguistic patterns to enhance her understanding of their complex harmonic language. Central Command has approved the establishment of the first joint colony on Nexus Point, Zarkon informed her, his voice carrying the subtle harmonic undertones that indicated satisfaction. Construction will begin within the next rotation cycle. Jackson nodded, her expression thoughtful as she studied the cosmic display before them. 3 years ago, our species were on the brink of conflict. Now we're building colonies together. That's quite an evolution. The collective has come to recognize the efficiency of collaboration, Zarkon replied, though they both understood that the transformation went deeper than pragmatic considerations. In the months following the initial treaty, exchange programs had brought Alliance and Xanthari specialists together in unprecedented cooperation. The technological sharing had accelerated scientific advancement on both sides, while cultural exchange had begun to transform perspectives in ways that neither side had anticipated. Most significantly for Zarkon, the Xanthari collective had begun to re-examine its emphasis on uniformity. A new philosophical current was emerging among the younger generation, one that valued individual contributions to collective wisdom rather than enforcing rigid conformity. It was a subtle shift, but a profound one. The beginning of an evolutionary leap that might ultimately transform Xanthari civilization. "Have you experienced any pressure to undergo synchronization therapy?" Jackson asked, referencing the procedure designed to correct individuating tendencies among Xanthari citizens. "Not for the past 7 months," Zarkon replied. "My most recent evaluation classified my individuating patterns as adaptive specialization, rather than developmental anomaly. It seems the collective is developing new categories to accommodate changing realities." Jackson smiled, a gesture that Zarkon had learned to interpret with increasing accuracy over their months of collaboration. "Adapt or become obsolete, right?" "Indeed," Zarkon agreed, his compound eyes reflecting the swirling cosmic phenomena before them. "Though I have come to believe that true adaptation requires more than simply responding to external pressures. It demands internal transformation, the willingness to become something other than what you have been." As the adaptation continued its journey into uncharted space, Zarkon reflected on the interrogation room where this transformation had begun, a place designed to contain and control that had instead become the catalyst for liberation and growth. The paralytic compound hadn't worked. The containment field had failed. The categorical assumptions had crumbled. And in their place, something new had emerged. Not just a treaty between species, but a recognition that the greatest frontiers weren't the unexplored regions of space, but the unexplored possibilities of connection across differences. The interrogation room couldn't hold her, and in failing to do so, it had released him as well. From the limitations of collective thinking, from the constraints of categorical classification, from the assumption that dominance was the only path to security. As the ship's sensors detected a potentially habitable planet in the swirling cosmic dance of the void, Zarkon experienced a sensation that would have once been alien to him, but now felt increasingly natural. Anticipation, not just for what they would discover, but for who they might become in the discovering. Evolution, it seemed, was not merely about survival after all. It was about transformation, and that, perhaps, was the most important lesson the interrogation room had taught them all.